Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it was sent to me by one of our brother, and the message that he sent to me reads like this. Hello, Brother Nanshi, how are you? So I finished my high school. This was in the year 2006. My parents, they were very poor. As for my father, he was just a gardener in an area that is called Park Town in Harare. And my mother, she was a maid at a certain farm, and life was just difficult. It even became more difficult when I was supposed to go and join the army. But unfortunately, we had not eaten anything. We had only eaten guava fruits. This was for about 2 days when my little sister collapsed and fainted because of hunger. That same night, me and my friend, we then went to this other farm, and with the intention to steal some maize so that we can at least cook for about a day, because what we used to do is that we would go around following the railway tracks or walking along the main road, and we'll be picking up maize grains that would have fallen from the goods train or from the trucks that will be carrying the maize grains. But with the economic crisis that was there in our country at that time, we were just too many that were following the railway tracks trying to get some grains. That was why we then thought of going to that farm just to steal some food to eat. We went into that farm unnoticed, and we even managed to get 2 sacks that were full of maize grains in the farm store. And as we were about to leave, that was when the dogs started barking. They kept on barking until the farmer woke, and we then started running. As we were running, we then dropped the other sack of maize grains, and we continued running, carrying only one. We ran towards this other hill. That was when my friend screamed in pain, for he had been bitten by a puff adder. He had stepped on top of a puff adder and he was bitten by that snake. So I was left with no choice. I waited for the farmer and his dogs to catch up on us because I wanted him to save my friend. On that night, I lost my friend, and the farmer, he lost 2 of his dogs, because when the farmer approached us, he did not listen to my cries. When I screamed, "Snake, snake, my friend has been bitten by a snake," but he released his boar balls on us, and they kept attacking my friend, and underneath lay that snake, and it bit him repeatedly. And the dogs, as well, as they were trying to attack him, they were also bitten by that snake. By that time that these farmers realized that this was what was happening, it was too late for my friend. He had been bitten 2 times on the back and on his leg. He passed away a few minutes after the police arrived on the scene. I was then arrested and I stayed in prison, and that is why I could not join the army. When I came out of prison, it was even worse, because my father, he was now unable to work. He was so sick at that time, and he died the following year. When my father passed away, that was when I made a promise to myself that I was going to become as rich as Bill Gates himself if I was ever going to be given that opportunity. I was hurt by what the pastor said on my father's funeral. He said that we were not burying my father, but it was more like we were just throwing away his body, because we could not afford to buy him a coffin. Even those makeshift coffins, we could not even afford that one. When my father was supposed to be taken out of the mortuary, his body was delayed because there was no coffin to put him into. He had no coffin, but there was one carpenter. This carpenter, he was working at Mbudzi interchange. He was the one who offered to make a coffin for my father, and he made one, and we buried my father at Mbudzi cemetery. After we had buried my father, I then left home and I started working for this other man who had bought a residential stand in Waterfalls. So he wanted some farm bricks to be made. I worked for him until he hired another man to assist me. So this man, he came from an area in Honde Valley, both of us, we came from very poor backgrounds, but I think that this man, he was even worse because his father, he had many wives. He said that his father had about at least 20 wives, so the father did not even care about the well-being of his children, and he would always tell me a lot about very powerful healers that came from his village. I kept begging him to take me to a healer who could make me to become rich, until the day that he said that he wanted us to go and get rich. We got onto the train to save money, and we completed the rest of the trip by bus. We arrived in his village at around 2 a.m. and we slept in the bushes because he did not want his parents to know that we were in the village. The next morning, early in the morning, just before sunrise, there came a man who was holding a small bag. The man was really scary, like a thug, and he was holding a blue kid's bag, those ones that kids use to carry to school. But the bag was so heavy and it smelled like blood. And as for my friend, he did not want me to get close to that bed, to that bag, and he did not want me to hold it. We then crossed over into Mozambique and we arrived at the healer's house, and there was a very big queue. My friend's bag was taken from him. Then about 8 days later, we got to see the healer, who was said to be almost 130 years old, and he was scary to look at, and what he said we could not even hear because he was just whispering. And there were two women that were kneeling close to the place where he was sleeping. For that man, he was too old. For that man was too old. He did his consultations whilst he was sleeping. So those two women, they were always kneeling down close to the place where he was sleeping and listening to the old man silently, and they would tell us what he would have said. He said that he did not care what had brought us to him, for he had heard this same story from people from our country over and over again. Over 1,000 times he had heard this story. There was a big pot that was brought before us, and inside that pot, when it was opened, I saw that there was a decomposed human head that had maggots that were crawling in and out of that decomposed human head. And the old man whispered and said, "You have to feast on the head of your sister." He said as he was pointing at my friend. That was when it dawned on me that my friend had his sister murdered, and I saw that same small bag that was also in that consultation room, and it was full of blood stains. My friend started digging into that pot, eating from the decomposed head of his sister, and I was told to do the same. As I started eating, I saw a man that was exiting. As I started eating, I then saw a man that was leaving my body. This man, he was like transparent and wore like shiny clothes. And when he left, that was when I got the courage to continue eating, because all along I had been crying. I had been crying as one of the healer's assistants had been forcing me to eat without vomiting. But as for my friend, he ate it all without even complaining. When we were done, we were told to go and find firewood that we would use for the next 2 days. And we were given a very big drum, and we were told that for 2 days, once the fire had been started, it was not supposed to die down. So we filled up the drum with water and the head of my friend's sister inside that drum, and we placed the drum on the fire. Then the water started boiling until it was all finished up, and we were told to fill it up. We did this for 2 days, and we were just sleeping close to that place where we had that big drum on top of the fire. The water kept on boiling and boiling until all the skin was removed from the skull. Only the bones were what were remaining. After 2 days, the skull was removed and the skull was broken into several pieces. We were made to grind it until it was powder. This was after it had been dried up, and then it was placed in a container, the powder, and then it was given to my friend. After my friend was done with his consultation, then it was my turn I was told to return back home with some charms, and I had to get my mother killed. After she would have been killed, the thugs were going to cut off her head, and I was supposed to get her head, and then I had to return with my mother's head to Mozambique. Since my friend was going to be rich in the next 3 days, he was going to assist me, but I hesitated, and when the healer saw that I had hesitated, the healer called me a woman. He called me a coward who did not deserve to be at his shrine. I was then given a charm that was going to demand blood, and I was told that I would not live to be 40 years, and currently I am 35. I only turned 35 this year, so I am left with only 4 years to live. As for my friend, he can live for as long as he wants, and his rituals only demanded blood only once. But as for me, it will demand blood from me until the day that I die. And the healer whispered and laughed at me and said that, for you are a coward, then you are going to be the snake's final meal. When I returned to Harare, my friend stayed in Mozambique for further strengthening, since his consultation involved ritual murder, so the spirit of his cousin sister was supposed to be trapped. I returned back to Harare and bought my mom an African attire. She had seen one in a Nigerian movie and she wanted it. I bought it for her, and she got sick until she died. And my mom, she passed away when she was at Parenyatua Hospital. I went there with the charm to kill her off. She was hooked to an oxygen machine. The doctor said that since the money that we were supposed to pay to the hospital, we could not afford the money, then they were going to unhook her from the oxygen machine. Without thinking twice, I said, do it, doctor, do it. Yet in my pocket, I had close to $2,000. My mom's sister, she cried and she cried and she said, poverty is a sin. Oh dear sister, now they are going to take you off from this oxygen machine. This means that you are going to die, for you cannot breathe by yourself anymore. I do not have money. Please forgive me, my sister. If I could, I would have sold myself so that you can just live. But she did not even know that I had so much money, but I wanted my mom to die. After my mom had passed away, her blood filled up a clay pot that my friend later brought for me from Mozambique, and my snake regularly will drink from it after it would have worked for me. My friend lied to his family that he was in South Africa for almost 2 years, yet we were staying in Harare. We started with a very small business of just selling purified water. No customer ever came to that stupid shop anyway. We would open the shop and we would just leave our worker. We only had one girl that was working for us. She never sold anything. We were just giving her the money for nothing, but it was just a front for our ritual money. Then when it was COVID time, this was like the perfect opportunity to get my little sister killed, because after my mom had passed away, people started talking. So even though the snake wanted the blood of my sister, I then told the snake to at least drink the blood of my mom a little bit and a little bit until people would have forgotten about how my mom had passed away and how all of a sudden I had started making money. So when COVID came, then the ritual sacrifice was done. So here I am, Brother Nashi. I am almost at the end of my life. When I am around 37 or 38, I am going to impregnate a mad woman and a baby boy will be born. That is part of the contract. And when me and my friend dies, which will happen to me first, then I will go back to that traditional healer's shrine to be a slave of the healer's shrine for the next 40 years, which he gave me, working for him as a tokoloshi, and he will be giving me to the people that will come to his shrine, to his children. Then I will be sold off so that I can work just like what I am doing with the snake that I got from this traditional healer. So it is more like a revolving door. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our dear brother. Strange things indeed, they do happen in this world.